Hello again and welcome to another live blockchain webinar. In English again, as we usually do on Thursdays. The topic today will be second layer solutions. We'll be mainly talking about Ethereum, a little bit about Bitcoin. And yeah, I just want to tell you, what is this? Why is it important and interesting? What is to come? And next week, we will talk about different things that go into the same direction in general. But yeah, more to that while we're at it. After that, as per usual, time for a Q&A. And now let's get started. So let me go over to the presentation, and here we are. So layer 2 or second layer, what is that? It's a blockchain scaling solution, one of different ones. And you might have heard before, you might have noticed yourself that sometimes on Bitcoin and more so even on Ethereum, transactions can be really, really expensive. And transactions can take a long time until they're confirmed. Why is that? That is because blockchain mainnets are very slow, especially so the proof of work mainnets. By mainnet, we mean just the Bitcoin network itself in case of Bitcoin, the Ethereum network itself in case of Ethereum, and so on. That's the mainnet. In Bitcoin, we have in theory up to 7 transactions a second. In practice, it's more like 4 to 5. In Ethereum, we have 12 to 14 transactions a second in theory. In practice, again, it's less. It's more like 7 to 8 because transactions can be bigger and more complex on Ethereum as well. And that's just not a lot. So when more people use these networks at the same time, then there is a competition to basically get into these blocks because, yeah, let's imagine there are 20 transactions a second or 30, then not everybody can be in the next blocks. That's just not possible. So there's this competition, and that between the users, and the competition is by price. Who pays the most gets in first, and that's what makes it so expensive. And that's what also makes some transactions that are not super expensive quite slow at times, and the congestion times basically. And these scalability issues are just the main issue that face blockchain in general. It's the biggest problem, also very much in the way of true mass adoption of these technologies, is the scalability issue. Then like something way below 100 transactions a second is just not what we need to really go somewhere. If we look at stuff like the Swift network, the Visa network, something like that, they have vastly more transactions, talking tens of thousands a second or more. And blockchains can right now not really compete with that, which is a problem. So we need solutions for that. And what solutions could that be? What ways to scale are there? So an on-chain solution that I just want to mention here today is the so-called sharding, which is to say we use parallel blockchains. So instead of just one blockchain, we have 10 blockchains in parallel, or 100 blockchains in parallel. And so now, disregarding, of course, the necessary cross-chain communication and the bit of overhead that will have to happen there, if we have 10 or 100 times the number of blockchains, then that means that we only have about 1/10 or 1/100th the amount of transactions per individual chain. And that means we get close to 10 or 100 times the number of transactions per time that we can put through these chains. So that's one on-chain solution that, for example, Ethereum is very much working on. It's a guaranteed part of Ethereum 2, one of more and other scaling solutions that will be part of Ethereum 2. Another another way to scale is to use proof of stake instead of proof of work, or even other consensus mechanisms. Thing here is though that proof of work is still the most trusted and the most battle proven, has been in use the longest, and is known to be safe and secure. Proof of stake, people are reasonably sure, but not 100% basically. like extremely close to 100%, but nothing is as proven and accepted as proof of work is. And then there's yet another way, and that is to just use DATs that aren't even blockchains. So a DAT is a distributed ledger technology. That's the super class basically of blockchains. Every blockchain is a DAT, but not every DAT is a blockchain. And to not use the blockchain architecture, but a different implementation of the DAT idea can be another way to scale the number of transactions and the number of computations per time that can be done. The maybe most common example of a DAT, the most known at least, example of a distributed ledger that is not a blockchain is IOTA or IOTA, where where it's not a chain and they also don't use blocks. So they use what is called a tangle. That is one other possible way to scale. And then there are off-chain solutions. So the things I mentioned first are on-chain solutions that are changes to the blockchain itself or to the DAT itself, or architectural implementations of it. And then there are solutions that don't touch the blockchain itself. The blockchain, by the way, is layer 1. So layer 1 in Bitcoin is the Bitcoin network. Layer 1 in Ethereum is the Ethereum network. And then, off-chain solutions, they do some of the work off-chain. That's why it's called off-chain. And this is then called a layer 2. It's a layer on top of the blockchain, on top of layer 1. And layer 2 solutions include, and now I'm adhering here to the definitions of the Ethereum organization because I find it convenient and also kind of agree with it. And layer 2 solutions are solutions that continually interact with the layer 1, with the main blockchain, but offload a lot of work elsewhere. And these are rollups and these are state channels. What these are and what types of these exist comes in a moment, but this is what the layer 2 solutions are on Ethereum. And other off-chain solutions that are also often called layer 2 solutions, strictly speaking, are not, but maybe the distinctions there are a bit fuzzy or matter of opinion also. Other off-chain solutions are side chains. And a side chain is just a completely separate blockchain that is compatible to the main chain, but is just completely separate to it. They don't communicate with each other anymore. They're just as I said, completely separate. So that's the difference between side chains and the layer 2 solutions, where layer 2 all the time gets back to the layer 1. Side chains do not necessarily. And an example for, and side chains are used by bridging assets to the side chain, then do stuff on the side chain. And if you want your assets back on the main chain, you can bridge them back. So you could call the Binance Smart Chain, for example. I'm sure Binance Smart Chain would disagree, as would Ethereum, but still the definition fits. You could call Binance Smart Chain a side chain of the Ethereum network, because that works as the definition goes. You bridge assets from Ethereum to Binance Smart Chain. Then you do things there for a lot less money, fees, costs. And then if you want, you can bridge them back to Ethereum. So as you might be aware, for example, swaps and transactions in general are a lot cheaper on Binance Smart Chain. This might change, will change when Ethereum 2 is there and Binance Smart Chain gets more adoption, because then Ethereum 2 will get cheaper, Binance Smart Chain will get more expensive. But right now, that's definitely true that working on BSC is a lot less expensive than working on Ethereum is. And other solutions that you might have heard of maybe is on Bitcoin, the Lightning Network. That's a solution that also uses channels, and the Plasma Network, or just Plasma, on Ethereum. But I want to focus in this webinar this week. We get into other things next week. This week, I want to focus just on the 2 different layer 2 solutions that are rollups and that are state channels. So here's an overview of scaling solutions. These are called, they're all called in this graphic, which I stole from Coin98 Analytics. Thanks for doing the graphic, it's a good one. Layer 2 scaling solutions on Ethereum here. That's just an overview of different projects that exist. Some of these you might have heard of. For example, Raiden is somewhat well known. It's a state channel solution on Ethereum, a payment channel solution. Then, yeah, in this graphic, strictly speaking, according to the definition of the Ethereum organization, only the stuff in the upper right with the only everything that is called rollups there, and on the lower left, the state channel stuff is strictly speaking layer 2, and the rest isn't quite layer 2, but okay. There are also scaling solutions that are off-chain, and so far it's good enough. I want to go into stuff like sidechains, Validium and Plasma, definitely Validium and Plasma, maybe sidechains next week. And if there's time next week, I want to go into a few examples of these different projects that you see on screen right now. I don't know if there's time for that next week. If I need the full half hour again for the technical side, then the presentations, examples will come a week later still. We will see how fast that goes. So let's get into the actual layer 2 stuff. And let's start with the rollups. What do we mean by rollup? In general, we mean that we roll up a bunch of transactions into one transaction on the main chain, on layer 1. So what's the idea here? The execution of transactions happens outside layer 1. And the execution is the really expensive stuff. That's the computation, right? This is where you have to do calculations on the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM. And that's the really expensive stuff. That's more expensive usually than just storing the new state. The new state can be this user now has 10 tokens X less, or let's say 10 peak tokens less, and that user, that address has now 10 peak tokens more. That's the resulting change of state of a transaction. To make this transaction happen, though, computations are necessary, and that is the really expensive stuff here. So by offloading the calculations, the computations, away from the layer 1, away from the main blockchain, and do them however, that isn't even defined. This depends on the project itself. And then not only do we put the computation away and only store the resulting state back on the actual blockchain, but also we roll up a lot of like tens or hundreds, maybe even thousands of transactions and store all these resulting changes in just one transaction on the layer 1 on the main chain. That's where the term rollup comes from. This means that we save a lot of action on the main chain, like a lot of action. And the upside of these layer 2 solutions, the rollups, is also that the specifically the rollups is that the resulting data that comes out of these calculations is always saved on the main net. And that means that smart contracts that live on layer 2, so outside the main blockchain, they can see and use the data from the layer 1, which makes these things very secure because they, for example, can look up your, let's say, the amount of tokens you have right now. The layer 2 contract can just look this up on layer 1, and what is on layer 1 is definitely true. And so this makes the rollups pretty safe and secure. So properties of rollups are lower fees and a higher transaction throughput. These things are a bit equivalent. The higher the possible throughput is, the lower get the fees usually, and vice versa. And the fees, high fees, are only a result of the desired current transaction throughput being as high or higher than the theoretical maximum is. That's what makes the fee high. So they're a bit similar points. And also they are open. So basically everybody can just interact with layer 2 stuff that is a rollup. Everybody can work with rollups, and there's nothing necessary to get into there or something. So it's open for participation by everybody just from the start, these rollups, and that's a nice property of that. And then there are two different types of rollups that can be done. And the one type is the so-called zero-knowledge rollup. And this term comes from the zero-knowledge proofs. You might have stumbled upon the abbreviation ZK SNARK. A SNARK stands for a succinct non-something argument of knowledge, a non-interactive argument of knowledge. So in short, a snark is like a receipt that says, yes, this is definitely true. We have proven it correct. That's what a snark is. It's a proof of correctness, if you will, like a receipt. And the ZK stands for zero knowledge. And the zero knowledge here means that we don't need to know the inside details of transactions, but we do know still that they're correct anyway, without being able to look into that in detail. And so zero knowledge rollups do put those proofs of correctness, those snarks, they put those on the main chain from time to time. And this also means that they do the validation. They put proper work in, computational work in, to prove all the transactions that happen in these rollups. And that means that the work to validate them has already been done when the stuff goes back to layer one, right? So it has been proven, the work has been done quite a bit, and the certificate of correctness, that is absolutely true, this gets stored on the blockchain main layer, layer one. And this means that as soon as a zero knowledge rollup transaction hits the mainnet, then it is done right away. There's no way this is not done anymore in a few blocks, for example, which is not the case for the next type of rollups. So the downside of these zero knowledge rollups is that they are computationally intensive. So they are not as fast as they might be. They're still very, very, very fast compared to mainnet transactions. And another downside is, depending on implementation, that some don't have EVM support. That means they don't support the Ethereum virtual machine, and or not in full at least. And that means that some zero knowledge rollup solutions don't support smart contracts, or definitely not all kinds of smart contracts, only certain ones. For example, only ERC20 token transactions might work on certain implementations of zero knowledge rollups. That is a bit of a downside for these things. The upside is, as soon as a ZK rollup hits the mainnet, it is done, and you have access to your funds right away. The other type of rollups goes the opposite route, you could say, the so-called optimistic rollups. And those are called optimistic rollups. Why? Because they don't do any type of validation at first. They just assume every transaction that comes in is completely true, is completely legit. This is why they're called optimistic. These have the upside that they are fully EVM compatible. This means arbitrary type of transactions, all kinds of smart contract stuff, everything you can imagine, and everything that is possible on the main layer of Ethereum is also possible within optimistic rollups. That's cool, of course. And because they don't do any validation at upfront, they are not very computationally intensive. And this means that they have a much higher throughput even than the zero knowledge rollups can provide. The thing is, though, that when such a rollup then is stored on the main blockchain, is stored on the Ethereum chain, we are not yet 100% sure that all these transactions are actually correct, because no validation has been done on them yet. The computational work has not yet been put in because they're optimistic. This means that transactions can be what is called challenged later. And this means, simply put, somebody can say, this is done in software, obviously. It's not a person that looks at these things. But somebody can say, this looks fishy, this looks fraudulent, please check this. And then actually only the computational work will be put in to really do the proper validation and find out, is the transaction or the transaction in the rollup maybe, are these legit or not? This means that it takes longer until the so-called finality is reached, because it is possible that although the transactions in an optimistic rollup have already hit the mainnet, they're already stored on the Ethereum blockchain, it's possible that a few blocks later, these transactions get challenged and then actually proven fraudulent. And this means they didn't happen after all, right? Because if they are proven fraudulent, of course, they do not get accepted, which means they didn't happen. And this means that although optimistic rollups provide us with a much higher throughput over time, that means, let's just say they can do 1,000 transactions a second, depending on implementation. The time until you can send that money on to somebody else can actually be longer than in the zero knowledge rollups, because finality is not necessarily reached the moment that the optimistic rollup hits the main chain. And how does this even work? It's pretty complicated. Let's just say it is implemented in a way that he who submits a fraudulent transaction loses money, and he who proves a transaction fraudulent gains money. And this is very, very simply put. It's extremely simplified because it's a pretty complex solution. But it is incentivized to find fraudsters, and it is heavily disincentivized to do fraud because you lose money. To say this in short, how that works. And then there's the other type of layer 2 solutions. We are done now with the rollups. Let's get to channels. And there's two types of channels. Basically, there are state channels and there are payment channels. And strictly speaking, there are only state channels, because payment channels are just one very specific type of state channel where you can't do all things. You can only do payments. That's why they're called payment channels. So what is the idea here with these channels? The idea is basically that two people or more open a channel. And what is a channel? It is, technically speaking, a multi-signature smart contract. And that means when stuff happens in the smart contract, both parties that open the smart contract have to agree. And so the opening of a channel, that means, for example, Alice and Bob, or you and I, we both put one Ethereum up into the smart contract on chain. We both sign this thing as correct. We both say, yes, this is what we want to do now. So the opening of a channel, that happens on chain. This has to be paid for as per usual, because it's a transaction on the main blockchain. Now, though, that the channel is open, we can do whatever we want, all kinds of transactions that are allowed by the implementation of the channel. But however many transactions we want to do, we can do inside of this channel completely off-chain. We just keep a separate list, basically. And let's say I send you 0.2 Ethereum, and then I send you 0.1 more, and then you send me 0.5 back, and we do this 50 times for whatever reason, because we work together, and that's, or maybe we play games together and we win and lose all the time. For some reason, we send each other a lot of money a lot of the time. And we just keep a ledger of this completely on the side, completely off-chain, no computation involved. And then when we're done, we also both agree on these transactions together, right? So we both have a consensus, because it is between you and I. And for every single thing, we have an off-chain consensus. So that's completely done and legit. And then we are done. We don't want to play anymore, or we need our assets back that we put into the opening of the channel. And then let's say in the very end, I, of my one Ethereum that I put in, have only a half Ethereum left over. And you now have 1.5 Ethereum instead of the one that you started with. So of course, the overall amount that is in the channel is the same, because nothing left the channel. It only got transferred back and forth between channel participants, but nothing went into after opening the channel. Nothing got out of it after closing the channel. So when we're done working together, playing together, whatever, we close the channel again. And that is the second and last transaction that actually happens on the blockchain. And that's the really cool thing about these channels. Only the opening and the closing of channels are on-chain transactions that you have to pay classical transaction fees for. Everything in between can be literally free, depending on implementation, but it can be literally completely free of cost. And well, that's obviously very nice, right? And when we close the channel, then we both basically submit the list of transactions into our multi-sig smart contract, and we both sign the thing and say, yes, this is what happened, this is true, we both agree. And then it gets stored on the main net. And then we are done with that. And now we both get our assets back that we have put into this channel, or the assets that are left over, right? So this means in the example, if we both put one in and after lots of transactions were done, I only have half an Ethereum left, we have 1.5 left. The closing of the channel will just literally transfer 1.5 out of the 2 in the channel to you and only half to me, and then we're done with that. This is how channels work. These transactions can be more complicated. If it's not a payment channel, but a state channel, for example, we could play chess in this channel where every single move of a piece, every single game move is a transaction. And the state that we open the channel with is just how the figures are in the beginning of the chess game. And the state that we close the channel with is how the board looks when one of us is checkmate. This is also a thing that we could do with channels, but it's more complicated than payment channel. This is why I said payment channels are just very specific, a very specific subset of these state channels, which can do all kinds of things. So channels are extremely fast because it happens completely off-chain, and only these channel participants have to agree with each other, which is extremely simple because basically no computation. And this means also there's extremely high throughput. The more people have channels with each other, the more connected they are also. And this means if Alice has a channel with Bob, and Bob has a channel with Christina, and Alice wants to transact to Christina, but Alice and Christina don't have a channel, it's still possible because the network will then see the channel network. For example, this is how Lightning works on Bitcoin. Will then just see, wait, so Alice wants to go to Christina, but they don't have a connection, a direct one, but Alice is connected to Bob and Bob is connected to Christina, so we just go via Bob. So the transaction can still happen completely off-chain, although they're not even directly connected. This means also the more people are participating, the higher the probability is that different people are connected somehow, although they are not connected directly. And this results in the lowest cost per transactions. As I said, transactions inside the channel can be literally free, depending on implementation. And I mean, free is just a great price. I think we can agree on that. And the only two transactions ever that have to happen on-chain and have to be paid for is the opening and the closing of the channel. So things that could be looked at as downsides of the channel implementation are that channels have to be created. This costs money. It's a rather complex transaction. It's a more complicated transaction for sure than just sending Ethereum or sending an ERC20 token, because then the channel opening has to store how much money is in. It's a multi-signature thing and so on. So it costs, this transaction to open a channel costs more, definitely, than just sending an asset. Now, what is if I only want to send something to you just once and we know upfront this is not going to happen again? Or maybe it's going to happen one more time, but no more than that. Then it would not make sense for us to open a channel up front, do the transaction in the channel, and then close the channel again, because the two transactions of opening and closing will definitely be more expensive than just sending it directly. So this can be looked at as a downside. I would say in that case, just don't use channels. Not really a downside in my mind. Another downside, now that is actually a bit of a downside, is that to participate in a channel, let's say payment channel network, you do have to lock assets into this channel when you open one. You do have to lock something in there to be able to participate. And this means that as long as your asset is locked in this channel, let's say you have 2 Ethereum and you put one into the opening of a payment channel to be able to participate, or same in Bitcoin, right? Let's say you have 1 Bitcoin and you put half a Bitcoin into the opening of a Lightning channel. And now you suddenly need all your 1 Bitcoin on the mainnet and not inside the channel. Then you will have to close the channel first, because the stuff that is in the channel, that is in the channel network, is only in that network. It's locked in there and it is not available to you outside this channel network. So yeah, that's another potential downside. It's not a huge downside either. If you really need your asset right now outside of the channel network, you just close your channel again. You get your asset back right away. That is done. And another little downside of these roll-ups is, of these channels, is that they are not quite as open as the roll-up solutions are. So anybody can just go to a DEX, for example, that uses a roll-up layer 2 solution and can just participate like that right away. There's nothing else necessary you have to do. It's all done for you. In that sense, the roll-ups are super open. The channels are not quite as open because, as I said, you have to open a channel to be able to participate in a certain channel network, usually payment channel network. And this can mean that you need a specific wallet that is able to do this. In the case of Bitcoin, for example, if you want to use the Lightning Network, you have to have a special wallet that is Lightning enabled, Lightning capable. So not every Bitcoin wallet can actually participate in Lightning payments. And in that sense, channel implementations, channel solutions are not as open. And yeah, let me wrap up again with this picture that I showed you before, with this overview, just to show you that now this is Ethereum specific, right? As you might notice from the big Ethereum logo and name in the middle, shows you that there are quite a few things already that are being worked on. Some of these are live already as well. And some of these are very cool and very interesting. And yeah, as I said, next week, I want to tell you a bit about Validium, want to tell you a bit about Plasma, maybe go into sidechains, but sidechains aren't really that complicated. So maybe not, or maybe just 2 sentences or something. And then if there's time, I want to go into some specific projects that you see on screen right now. And if there's no time for that next week, we will go into some specific projects the week after. And with this, I am done for now and at the end of my presentation. And so as per usual now, I will have a look into the live stream chat and see if anybody of you had any questions. And if so, I will answer some questions for you. And if not, then I will just wish you a lovely day and see you next week. At the end of my presentation. You are welcome. A general introduction. We had that. Let me look if I can see when that was actually. It wasn't too long ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. But what I can also very much recommend for general, for just like the general basic topics, is the back office of Market Peak, where we have, I think, like 150 plus videos that go into all kinds of topics, starting from the very basics and going into more complex topics later. So I would definitely recommend to have a look into there. And I think I just found the basic webinar. Let me check that out. Yes, yes, indeed. I put the link into the really base, like what is a blockchain in the first place webinar. I put this into the chat. Then you don't have to search. It's also on this channel here, of course. But let me just put this into the chat, and then you can watch that if you want. There you go. Yeah, so that one is, let's just say, what is a blockchain in the first place, and so on. Just had a little issue. Okay, so there was a little issue right now. I don't know if I might have been offline for just a moment. That's possible. But yeah, that is the base video. Oh, wait, that's not correct. The link, oh, the link is, I don't know. Maybe the link works for you. If not, you will find it on the channel here. That was the webinar a month ago. An overview of the business. You will also find that in the channel. I don't have a link handy right now for that though, but it's definitely in the channel. Like this channel that I'm streaming on right now, and also in the back office, I'm sure of that, yeah. But you should find this here too, should be called something like business presentation or something, I guess. Let me check. So few questions right now. I have a moment to look that up. Okay, so I see one in German. I see another one in German. So I see a market peak and peak DeFi business presentation. I didn't watch that one myself, so I don't know if that's like, I don't exactly know what's in there. I don't know who made it either, but this might just be what you're looking for. Here you go. And in any case, do absolutely have a look around the channel. Anyway, there's loads of interesting stuff on there. Turan, I'm sorry, I don't speak what I assume to be Turkish. If it's not Turkish, I'm also sorry, but whatever it is, I don't speak it. I don't understand it. You are welcome. Okay, looks like nothing else is coming. I will wait for another minute, and if no further questions come, then I will bid you goodbye for today and for now. And yeah, hopefully see you again next week. Yes, good question, Turan. I wish we knew. That's really all I can say. We thought it would have happened a long time ago. By now, who knows? We really can't say, and we are not happy about this, but there is just nothing we can do. Yeah, that's I guess that's the same info you get in the Telegram channels as well, because yeah, we don't know. Alrighty, nothing else seems to be coming up, nothing technical at the very least. And so, yes, goodbye from me. Have a good morning, day, afternoon, or evening, depending on where exactly you are on the world. And I hope to see you again next week, where I will talk more about scaling solutions, particularly on Ethereum, and maybe go into a few projects as well if there's time for that. And with this, goodbye. See you again next time.